Enigma is Parametric Systems Automated Application Development Suite. Enigma is not development with no code. Enigma is not development with low code. Enigma is an integrated development environment that generates 99% of an application. Enigma 2020 is a simplified user interface for Enigma. This video explains how to use Enigma 2020. This is the Enigma 2020 interface. It works by making many assumptions about a new application. The banner across the top allows access to the original Enigma, where any of these assumptions can be changed. We will not be looking at these in this video. The 2020 interface allows all of the content of an application to be recorded. The first thing is to identify the application. This is done by entering the application name and confirming it using the accept control. This opens up the details that must be decided for the application. The short name is used for identifying the databases and libraries used to hold your application. It must be unique within the Enigma records. There will be two databases, one holds user tables, the other holds the data required by your application. There are 3 logs that Enigma can create to allow monitoring of the databases. The user actions log monitors the user database, and will record all changes to the user database content. This will be a very low volume, since the user database is changed rarely. The database actions log monitors the application database, and will record all changes to the content. It can monitor the database content in a snapshot implementation. The history log also monitors the application database if a history implementation is required. A history implementation records all the changes to the database records, so that there is a trace of what happened, and when it happened, to every application record. If a history log is requested, there must also be a database log requested. Select each log by clicking on the Y or N controls. Confirm the selections using the Save Application control. As the message says, all of the files, libraries and default programs will be created. This takes a few seconds, after which the program name field will be opened. But before starting to define a program, it is a good idea if there is some diagram showing the application and how the programs in it interact. This is my run chart for gathering the content required by the Motokana application. It shows the programs and the navigation between programs. The navigation looks quite complicated, but Enigma will make it easy to construct. We will not be looking at navigation in this video. It is covered in the user interface video. The blue shapes have already been coded. The next collection of programs to be done is vehicles, which starts with vehicle find. Enter the program name and use the accept control to open up the screen heading, and the program type selections. Enter a heading for the user interface, and then select the program type. There are 4 types available. Default specifies a program that will run before the application starts. It can be used for user identification, logon, etc. Internal frame specifies a program that will have a user interface displayed on top of the user interface of the preceding program in the navigation sequence. Menu choice specifies a program that will run when selected from the application menu. Subprogram specifies a program that will have a user interface that replaces of the user interface of the preceding program in the navigation sequence. These types do not have to be memorized. Enigma 2020 has a built-in help facility. Just double-click on any field where you want an explanation. Double-click again on the help text to clear the display. Use the Change Details control to blank out any errors. The Save Program control records the program and opens up the action field. In Enigma, the programs primarily operate by using a series of transactions, to communicate with other units required by the application. These units can be the database holding the application data, the database holding the user tables, a program external to the application, or the application memory. In Enigma 2020, the transactions are specified by selecting an action. There are 11 alternatives and the help facility explains each of them. In this video they will be explained as they are used when specifying the vehicle programs. The vehicle find program uses a find action to allow the user to specify which vehicle they want to add, or change in the data database. The find action only has one part, which is the content needed to control the vehicle search program, that follows in the navigation. Enter the name for the content, data and content field, and then use the content save control, to save the name and access the data definition panel. This panel allows the specification of a large amount of the data control for the application. Most data in an Enigma developed application has two names. They can be the same or different. The content data name that has just been entered is the one used when specifying the visible part of an Enigma developed application. The database name will be used to identify this data in the invisible part, the application database. Having two names allows Enigma to separate information and data. Information can be defined as data with meaning, and the meaning comes from the context in which the value held in the data is sourced or displayed. So, information is in the province of the user interfaces in the application. Data, on the other hand, is just a value held somewhere, usually in a database. So, there can be different information obtained from one data value, depending upon the context. For example, a teacher's name and a pupil's name. Each is different information, but both contain values obtained from the same data. Enter the database name for the data, and use the accept control to record that name, or use the search control to display a list of the previously specified database names, so that the names can be accurately connected. More of the data definition attributes, that need to be specified, will then be available. The selected attributes will define how Enigma will validate the data, when it is entered, and how Enigma will construct the HTML, when displaying or receiving the information. Stored size specifies the maximum size of the data in characters, that can be stored in the database. Any entered data value, longer than the stored size, will generate an error displayed to the user. Data type specifies the formatting applied to the data, and basic validation rules. There are 14 different selections, which are detailed in help. If you want to read all about them, then pause the video. When you start play again, the help will scroll down. Display size specifies the number of characters to be displayed on a user interface. It does not have to be the same as the stored size. For a drop-down selection list, only the abbreviated value for each alternative would be stored, but the expanded alternative would be displayed. Caption is a default field name displayed with the data. It can be altered when specifying the user interface. Caption size is the number of pixels used by the caption. It can be changed when specifying the user interface. If the space is too small to hold the caption, then the caption will split into two or more lines at the space character, closest to the end of the specified caption size. HTML input specifies the HTML format used for the data. There are 4 alternatives detailed in the help text. Initial value specifies a default value to be applied to the data, when creating the database table holding the data. Caption location specifies the default relationship of the caption to the data. It can be changed when specifying the user interface. Input status specifies how the user interface will display the data, and how it will record the data on the database. Use pause to read the help details. Selecting Yes for data selected specifies that the content will display as a drop-down list, from which one value can be selected. Two fields are available to specify the name of the list. One is mandatory, and the other is optional. These fields also specify the name of a radio button list, if that selection is made from the HTML input selections. The name entered will provide the name for the table in the application database, that will hold the alternatives for the drop-down, or radio button list. It will also be the program name prefixed by SEL for selection lists or OPT for radio button lists, when the program to maintain the drop-down list is created. Both selection and radio button lists are entered into the application menu, and the alternatives required in the list have to be entered, using the application. Generation of the menu entries, and the maintenance programs, is automatic. One selection or radio button list can be connected to more than one content data name. This is particularly useful for yes or no selections. User selection of a radio button can trigger a changed request to the database. Thus, a default request can be modified to a more specific request by changing the radio button. Select yes, in the data section process request, to cause this. The data description is a specification of what the data represents. The descriptions can be searched to find data that may supply the value required for the information. The tooltip will be shown to the user, if the cursor hovers over the data on the user interface. It can be changed when specifying the user interface to make it more applicable to the information being displayed or entered. There is a lot done when specifying the data definition. Use the OK control to record the data definition, or the clear control to cancel the data definition. If the data definition is cancelled, the content name will also need to be removed from the content list. The constant field can be used to force a constant value into the data. This can be useful to record fixed values in the database, especially where it is important that a specific value exists. This is a decision made by the developer, and cannot be changed by a user. Constants are rarely used with content data. That has given the first vehicle program all the information cannot be. So, let's move on to the second of the vehicle programs, vehicle search. The search sequence, defined for Motokana, is not specific to using Enigma. It happens to be the sequence recommended to make a user's selection of records to be processed as accurate as possible. It is much easier to work with the correct record, rather than correct mistakes, and bad decisions, after the event. So, in a database search program, two actions are desired. The first displays the values entered in vehicle find. The second lists details from the database that satisfy that search criteria. Change the content field into a drop-down list, by using the search control. Select vehicle name from the drop-down list, to add it into the content. The display action is now complete, so use Alter action to clear the entries. Select the Show action from the Action drop-down list. The Show action will list all the database details, that can be found using the value in vehicle name. It is added to the action list, which displays across the screen. Note the arrows. A new action is always added, at the end of the list. The arrows can be used to place a new action into its correct position in the sequence. It will be useful if the vehicle list is ordered, so that the most relevant records are at the top of the list. This can be done by specifying score, as the first of the content data names. Score ranks the records from 100 down to 1, depending on how closely the record reflects the search criteria values. Add score to the content list, and enter the attributes. Select vehicle name from the content drop-down. It is added after the score. Other data should be shown in the list. Use the clear control to allow direct entry of the data name into content. Our added data will be vehicle model, which adds to the content list, and then needs attributes. Vehicle owner's surname, which is also added to the content list, and needs attributes. Vehicle ID, which needs attributes, and is the unique identifier for the vehicle information included in one line in the list. This is a counter, so it is not displayed in the list of vehicles. The name is added to the content list, so that selection of one row in the list will tie subsequent programs to working with the identified vehicle. The content list can be reordered by using the up and down arrows. Data can be removed by using the remove control, alongside the data name. The data description can also be displayed by double-clicking the data name. The data requested in the content can come from one table, or several related tables, in the database. Here the vehicle owner has been included in the content. Most probably this will come from a person details table. The rest of the content would probably come from a vehicle's details table. The actual search of the database records is controlled by entries made in the right-hand control list. First, we need the data to be used as a controlling value. Use the search control to get a list of the data already specified for Motorcana. Select vehicle name from the list. For this search, that is all that is needed. Other searches may require more control, and that can be added as more data names, or by using the three fields following the control data name field. The first specifies the source of the data. In this case it will be user input. This field is more for documentation. The next field specifies the relationship between the value in the content field and the value stored in the database. This relationship defaults to equal, if not specified. There are also the standard relationships of not equal, greater than, etc., as well as the database search criteria between, contains string, and, in a value list. Additionally, there are two Enigma-specific relationships of partial date, and rotate. Please review the help text for details on these relationships. For vehicle name, the contains string relationship is selected. This allows as much as is known to be entered into vehicle name in the vehicle find program to control the search. The third field allows a value to be specified. These can be quite complex, but in the simplest form the value could be an indicator to show that only one class of records is required. Let's say the classes could be teachers and pupils. So, a value of T or P would limit the list to only those records that apply to the teachers or the pupils. Value defaults to space, which indicates that the value contained in the control field will be used. If there is no value in the control field, that is, a null or space value, then that control field will be ignored when conducting the search. The data specified in the control can come from one table, or from several related tables in the database. The control data has to identify the range of content values to be listed, but it does not have to identify where those values will be found. The tables are specified by the database design, and its specification for Enigma. That will be shown in a later video. Having included the vehicle owner's surname in the list, it would be a good idea to get the unique ID for the owner's person record. This can be added to the content list as owner ID. The owner details will be recorded using the person add, or person mod, programs. These programs have been specified already, and the person record has been given a unique identifier with a database name of PersID. Use the search control to list the database names that are already specified, and select PersID. The attributes specified for the PersID name are displayed. They can be altered if they are incorrect, but the alteration will apply to both person ID and owner ID. Use the accept control to attach owner ID to PersID. That completes the information definition for the vehicle search program. There are several possibilities when the program is run. 1. There may not be any vehicle identified by the search criteria entered into vehicle find. In this case the vehicle ID and the owner ID will be 0, and the rest of the content will be space. The search program will automatically navigate to the next program and display the search criteria detail. 2. There may be a vehicle identified by the search which has no owner attached to it. In this case the vehicle ID will have a value, and the vehicle fields in the content will be filled with whatever information has been previously recorded. The owner ID will be 0 and the owner's surname will be empty. 3. If only one vehicle is identified by the search, the content values will be filled, and the program will automatically transfer to the next program. Displaying a list of one record is a waste of time. 4. There may be more than one vehicle identified, in which case the list is displayed, and the user has to select the vehicle for use by the next program, or force the search criteria to be used. The important fact is that Enigma has identified the 6 information fields defined in the content. These information fields all have a value, even if it is space, or 0. The values in these fields will be passed from program to program, when the application is run. The value in the information may be updated as the application proceeds, or the value may be protected from update, as is the case with the unique identifiers. That completes this video on the basics of creating an application, including programs in it, and defining data for the application. The next programs are vehicle add and vehicle mod, which require the use of business rules. Implementation of business rules in Enigma is covered in the second of these training videos.